seems like that there's a major concern that the trainers have, and especially in barns that don't have closed, don't have any kind of cameras or anything like that, where somebody is going to come in and urinate in their horse's stall. The horse is somehow going to ingest, the hay that the guy or woman urinated on, and therefore come up positive for some issue, usually some kind of human medication. Michelle asked the question, but it's not just Michelle that I think has this concern. It's a lot of trainers. So let's play the clip, and then if you guys could respond to that, we'd appreciate it.
You're having a whole string of horses test positive for something. To me, that is most likely contamination. So in that instance where it would be contamination, then all of a sudden you are still being provisionally suspended immediately, right? I was unloading horses and the driver of the van got off and went into a stall and was peeing in the stall. And I ran over to him. I was like, hey, what are you doing? You can't pee in my stalls. And he told me, mind your own business. I'm like, you don't understand. This is my business. Like, you're peeing in my horse's stall. And we had like an altercation. We are literally in a barn with 2 bathrooms also. So I was really pissed. And so I told our grooms, like, don't put a horse in there. I closed off the stall, and it came back that the other guy who we generally deal with when we're shipping told me that guy is a diabetic. He is on metformin. They're actually really good friends. So I made a complaint to the van company. That is something that if I wasn't standing right there, we would not have known. A 2-year-old was slated to go into that stall. So what happens? That 2-year-old ran at Del Mar and he got tested positive for metformin. A, we would have been suspended. And B, we would have had no idea where it came from. And then we would have tested all of our grooms and none of them would have come back for it, right? So then we would have been really screwed.
So there's a number of things, misconceptions and things that Michelle just frankly got wrong that I think it's important to explain and clarify. So first, one of the things that is one of the rules and programs that is honestly sort of revolutionary under HISA and HIWU that never existed under the prior state system is what we call our atypical finding policy. So in the case of contaminated feed, we have 27 substances that fall under this atypical finding policy. And they actually include any substance that's ever been found in contaminated feed. So your scopolamines, your ractopamines, your synephrines, you name it, those are all on this list, along with substances that a horse can produce endogenously, like testosterone, for example, okay? If a horse tests positive for any of those, the trainer gets a notice saying, your horse had an atypical finding. Can you let us know, what feed you're using, what bedding you're using, et cetera? And in these cases, HIWU really takes on the burden of investigating and working with the trainer to get to the bottom to figure out what happened in that situation. Once that process is complete, and as long as HIWU feels like it's more likely than not that it was contamination, not only do you never get suspended, they never even get a violation. They don't even there's no disqualification even. So to suggest that, if you have a whole string with contaminated feed, that would be a time when there would obviously be contamination, and so there shouldn't be any suspensions. My point is we've never even notified someone of a violation. We've never accused them of a violation for a contaminated feed, let alone suspended. So that's just not true. And it's important to know we've had 44 atypical findings, and only 4 have actually been notified as cases and gone through the regular process. And all 4 of those were medications or therapeutics, I should say. They weren't banned substances, so they never would have been provisional suspensions anyways. So we go to such great pains to make sure that when a trainer is notified of a positive test, notified of a violation, that it isn't contaminated feed or contaminated bedding. And I think part of the reason why we don't get maybe credit or recognition of this program is that one of the benefits is we never make it public. So, we don't necessarily we talk about the program, but we don't actually say Trainer Bob had an atypical finding for ractopamine and it went away, because that's the whole point, is you shouldn't have, any sort of public disclosure if it really wasn't your fault. Nothing you could have done to prevent that from happening. And I also want to give the testosterone example a little bit more context. We've had a bunch of those. And what's been interesting about those is very often it's just that in the stud book, they're listed as a gelding, but they're really a colt or a stallion. So we're like, okay, that's fine because obviously testosterone level will be higher, and then that gets corrected. We've even had some mares who have had tumors that were producing testosterone endogenously that really shouldn't have been, and then ultimately had to have veterinary care. So what happens is that our science team, our HIWU science team, talks with that trainer's veterinarian, and they figure out like what's going on. So it's actually really providing a service to the industry. So it's a complete myth and misnomer to suggest that a horse would be really suspended for contaminated feed. It has never happened, and it will never happen. I want to also talk about the urination in the barn, and then I'm sure Ben wants to add something. So first of all, the metformin example isn't a good example because, as everyone should know, we've actually stayed all of the metformin cases. So we are currently not suspending or even putting a case in motion for a metformin positive. We do notify the trainer that it tested positive, but then we basically put it on ice. And that's because we're doing a number of administrative studies at University of California, Davis. They have a herd there that actually Ben and I were out there last week visiting, really impressive facility. And what's great about their herd is that they keep those horses in racing shape so that their metabolism and essentially their musculature is very similar to race horses. So they stay fit. We saw the horse run on the treadmill, etc. So the administrative study is actually going to help us understand whether or not it's really plausible for someone urinating in a stall to cause a positive test. We're not sure that it is plausible scientifically, but that's what we're trying to figure out. We want to know. We're also figuring out whether or not touching metformin and touching a horse or putting your hand in the horse's mouth, putting the bit in whatever, whether or not that could cause a positive test. Again, we don't think it's scientifically plausible, but we're doing the administrative test actually, or the administrative study, to see whether or not it's plausible. So both of those cases are really being addressed. And there are also a number of different rule modifications we've made around human drugs of abuse to treat them differently, to account for possible inadvertent transfer. And I think those have really, been successful and achieved what we set out for them to do. I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, I would add a few things. So with the metformin study, very, very happy that UC Davis agreed to take on this study. But just a reminder, that is being completely independently done by the RNTC and their scientific advisory committee, which, arguably there's no other group of science-minded experts in this industry. If Lisa and I wanted to go set up our own scientific committee, we wouldn't be able to do so because they all belong to this group already. So
absolutely,
there's a huge value in what the RNTC and that group brings here. And they agreed to take this on before they even asked Davis to do the administration study. They reviewed all the scientific literature they could on the substance, not just in horses, but in humans as well, because what they're trying to understand is how the substance metabolizes through a human body, if it is urinated into a stall, and then can a horse actually pick that up and be detectable, right? So they needed to try to understand everything they could about it before they wrote the studies for UC Davis to take on. So as Lisa said, very impressed by what UC Davis is doing out there with their herd and what they're hopefully going to report back. But they're going to report their findings back to the scientific advisory committee to then recommend to us on how they believe we should be regulating the substance. And what that means is there a certain level that it should be called positive at the end of the day based on potential contamination, right? And so, we're anxious to understand what it is they find, but we also want them to get it right. And so, we're giving them all the time we can to do this. And as Lisa said, all the cases are currently pending. We do notify the trainer they can go ahead and get the B sample tested if they want to. If we change how this is regulated, all those funds will be returned to those individuals. And, just happy to hopefully get it right. Thankfully we haven't had a metformin positive actually since the summer months. So, either way, things are happening out there, I think, to either better control potential contamination, or if it is being used, that's being stopped. So,
right. And so much so, guys, that I noticed that I think today you announced that all the Breeders' Cup entries and runners have come back with clean tests, and therefore those monies are going to be the purse monies are going to start to be distributed as well.
Yeah, I mean, I love hearing that you're doing the study on contamination, because me, as a person who doesn't know the equine anatomy and is not a scientist, I have no idea when people claim contamination, whether it's bullshit, like whether it's a complete fabrication and an excuse, whether it's a legit cause for these positive tests, or whether it's somewhere in the middle. Like, I'm so glad that we're hopefully going to get like a kind of final answer to that question. And I think that's going to be great for the sport moving forward. I think this is a good place to take a break. We're going to come back and we're going to talk a lot about the developments that HISA has been announcing in the last several weeks, several months since the last time we talked, Lisa. So we'll be right back after this break.